Like Benjamin Franklin once said, if you're failing to plan, you're planning to fail. So let's talk about sprint planning. As a leader, how do you facilitate this meeting between the different stakeholders to be successful?
Dive into the world of Agile Scrum, where we unravel the magic of sprint planning. Imagine a meeting room, a strategic battlefield where plans are laid out, roles are assigned, and the blueprint for victory is crafted. This is what sprint planning is all about. It's a crucial event in the Scrum framework, a time-boxed session that sets the tone and agenda for a sprint. In this stage, the team defines what can be delivered and outlines the path to achieve it. But who's the mastermind behind this operation? The product owner. They come prepared with lessons from the past, stakeholder feedback, and a clear vision for the product. But before diving into sprint planning, there's an important step: backlog refinement. It's like sharpening your sword before the battle, ensuring the backlog is reviewed, refined, and ready. The focus during sprint planning isn't just on the tasks, but also on the sprint goal. This goal is the team's North Star, the objective that guides their efforts throughout the sprint. It's written as clear, measurable outcomes, ensuring everyone knows what success looks like. Now that you've grasped what sprint planning is, let's delve into why it's critical for team success. Ever wondered why sprint planning is a game changer? Let's find out. Picture this: a basketball team preparing for a big game. Without a game plan, they'd be scattered, disorganized, and likely fumble their shots. But with a solid strategy, each player knows their role, their moves, and the ultimate goal. That's exactly what sprint planning does for your Scrum team. It's the strategy session that sets the tone for the entire sprint. During this time, the team comes together to discuss and decide what can be delivered in the upcoming sprint and how that work will be achieved. It's like mapping out the game plan, plotting the moves, and setting the goal for the match. This process is crucial as it creates a motivated and successful environment for the team.
I want to thank everybody for making it this far in the video. Remember, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, like this video. Continues more content going forward. Now, let's get back into the topic.
Everyone is on the same page, working towards a clear, measurable goal. There's unity in purpose, which not only boosts morale, but also increases productivity. Moreover, having a well-executed sprint plan allows the team to adapt to changes and unforeseen challenges. It provides the team with a roadmap, a guide that can be adjusted as needed, but always keeps them on track towards the sprint goal. As you can see, sprint planning is the secret sauce to a successful sprint. Before we wrap up, here are some golden nuggets to remember about sprint planning. It's the event that sets the tone for your sprint, defining what can be delivered and how. It's essential for the product owner to come prepared with lessons from the previous sprint, stakeholder feedback, and a clear vision for the product. Backlog refinement, carried out prior to sprint planning, helps refine the work agenda and set a focused direction. A clear, measurable sprint goal is vital, describing the objective of the sprint and guiding user stories. Trust and open discussion form the backbone of estimation. It's not just about the numbers, but about understanding what can be realistically achieved. Remember, Scrum is an empirical process. It's all about learning by doing, so don't be afraid of making adjustments along the way. It's through these iterations that you'll find the best path to your goals. Remember, a well-planned sprint is the first step towards a successful Agile journey. Keep sprinting towards success.
So today we're going to talk about where the theory meets practice, and I'm going to showcase this in Jira of how to do sprint planning. This, remember, is the advanced portion of it, so some tips and tricks I thought would be useful that you can use in your teams. And so first of all, the view that I'm going to use is this backlog view. So within Jira, making sure that you have this backlog view, click on this backlog version, you'll see something that looks similar to this. And you can see here, so remember, sprint planning is a planning event. So you're looking ahead at the next week or next 2 weeks with your team. And so the first thing I want to look at is, and you have to make sure, is you have alignment on the stories, right? There might have been some discussion in the backlog refinement There might have been other discussions in between there, to making sure you're aligning on actually what's in these stories. So keep that in mind. It's important as you're going through this to making sure you have alignment. You can see there are some descriptions here that are missing. Looks like a scope. Obviously that's a red flag, but keep in mind, this is where you have to finish it all because you're going to start the next segment or time box or the sprint. So very important as you go through this. You can see here, let me give an example. Here's one that's filled out, and you can see this is how I like to have my screen out, and I like to actually have this about 50-50 because first of all, when you're sharing your screen, it could be the Scrum Master, it could be the product owner, it could be the manager, it could be whoever, right? Just making sure someone's sharing the screen so you can kind of see and align on this topic of what this is, what the scope of is, making sure it has some kind of story point or estimation. So number one, making sure that alignment on the scope, right? Once you understand what needs to be done, then you can understand, well, how big is this task or how big is this piece of work? You can see here there's already estimated. If it isn't estimated, this is where you have to estimate it. And so I'm not going to go into details of how to do that. I have another video that's just on estimation. And also too, there's a video on the types of estimation. So that's in another video as well, as compare the different types of how you can plan, capacity plan for your team, as well as there's a poker planning video itself. So one thing I want to make sure, if while you're going through the team's work, there's also some things you got to ensure that are not missing. And those actions or those work items can be in the form of feedback from the stakeholders in the demo that just happened. So you might have to create an issue here to add that in there to make sure it gets planned with the rest of the work. And the retrospective, right? There might have been something in that retrospective before the sprint planning and you need to capture in here. Remember, the backlog captures everything that can be done. Doesn't mean it will be done, right? But if it's not in the backlog, most likely won't get done, right? Or you're not planning for the time for the team to actually complete that. So very important, you're capturing the items from the previous retrospective or demos. So another thing I would look for here is capacity planning. So looking at your team's past velocity, past capacity to estimate what you think you can do this one. So this one right here, I'm not going into the details of it, but there's other things, other videos I will cover. For example, reports, that will talk about that. Also, there'll be another video as well as what types of methods you can use to actually estimate for your team, whether that's taking yesterday's weather, right? A technique that's just taking the last sprint or last iteration. It could be an average of maybe the last 4, 6 sprints, right? There could be an average of a duration of the previous sprints. But remember, these were covered in previous details. Also, this report has a view. You can take a look at the different averages and different completions from your team so you can get that data. So really important, you're taking now, you have all what you need to do, you have the scope of it. Now it's like, how much can my team hold? Remember, you have to keep in mind there's PTO and out of offices. So those are things you got to modify a little bit from that data that you received to estimate what your team's gonna do this iteration. So keep that in mind as well. Very important. You take PTO out of office, maybe training, things that we're gonna remove from the capacity that maybe was accounted for, that wasn't accounted for in the past. Next thing here is now we have our capacity. I assigned them to the team here based on skill sets, right? That's usually what will happen. But remember, it's a team effort. So the team gets it all complete as a team, or they don't complete it as a team, right? And so in order to aggregate all of that information here, because there could be a lot more than just the stories I have here, it could be much larger. So this is where I would go down and actually gather this information from the team and aggregate it into the sprint goals. What are you trying to do? Right? You can see here I aggregated the 3 sprint goals that from these stories, what are we trying to do overarching? And just so the team knows that, you know what, you might not get 100% of the stories done, but you can get 100% of the goals done, right? Remember, the outcome-based, goal-based is most important here, because there might be new methods that are found while in the iteration that still accomplishes the goal with maybe not doing every single step that we thought it was, right? You're learning from new things. So keep in mind, that's kind of the main mindset you want your team to have, because then again, it's goal-oriented, right? You want to finish this goal. And so this is the aggregated version of that. So you'll have to work with your team to actually do that. Keep in mind that level. All right, so we went through, we updated our goals, and you can see here's the 3 goals that I have for this team aggregated from the stories we have shown. So now you need commitments from the team. And this is where you talk to the team and saying, maybe out of 5 meaning I'm 100% going to complete this, very confident. 1 being I'm not confident at all, complete this sprint. right? You go around the room because you want commitment from the team and you want to make sure you're not missing anything, right? If someone's maybe more extroverted and they're talking more in the meeting, there might be the introverted people that want to get some time to see, are we missing anything? Is there anything that we should be concerned about? And it kind of leads into that conversation of, if they are low, maybe a 2 or 3, what will get them to get higher? Maybe it's, hey, I need to have too much workload, right? Maybe I have too much for myself. And you can see here, you can aggregate this as well, as far as like, hey, if I'm Emily Dane, I have a lot of story points, I'm not confident 3. What would make you more confident, right? Is there support we can get from someone else? Do we have to take more story points off, right? Things like that. Those are the questions you should be asking. And the number the team gives on the commitments helps you actually go into and ask those type of questions. So important to think about that and why that's important. And the ultimate goal is to get the team more confident, right? You want them in the 4 or 5 range. And with that too, you want to capture that. So the next item I would say is important is you're capturing risk, issues, assumptions, and dependencies, right? Are there dependencies between different work, or dependencies between the next sprint? Hopefully there's not dependencies in the current sprint. That does happen, but you ultimately, it's very risky, right? Of things not getting complete. And so you might want to take a look and rearrange some things around and also capture this. And we'll have our own risks, issues, assumptions, dependencies, video in another video, capture another video. So I'm not gonna talk about the details, we're just gonna say you should capture it here, right? Before you start the sprint. And then also too, as a leader or scrum master, you can try to get ahead of some of these things so you can remove them and make sure your team's successful, right? You're a servant leader. How can I help the team accomplish these goals? And then the last one is starting the sprint, right? You would start the sprint right after this meeting. In best case, obviously might be some situations it seems like keep it an extra hour, I need to fix some things. It's really important though that you capture and you start the sprint once we have estimation here, because if you don't, the reports on the velocity might be a little bit wacky. And also when you start the sprint as well, take a look at the dates, because if the dates are in the past, there might be some wacky metrics that come out, because you might be capturing the velocity before they were estimated, and so it'll look like you committed to 0. And so this goes back to the committed to completed topic, and we'll talk about that in the reports. So important that you're capturing, make sure you have a start date, that you have all the data, all information for your stories, and then making sure as well the team is prepared for that as well for it to start. So making sure they have the information and making sure they're aligned on the work. So to encompass everything, I know there's a lot here in sprint planning. In this meeting can last, an hour, 2 hours, depending on how much work is done before, right? If you do a lot of backlog refinement and you actually have some of that data, this meeting can go pretty quick. But if you don't, you pay for it later. You pay for an hour later. So you'll have to capture it here because this is when it starts, right? So here are the top items that I talked about in this video, just to capture it in one view, is to show the backlog. It can be anybody, it doesn't have to be the Scrum Master. Go through that backlog, look through it, that view that I just showed you, go through the stories, make sure there's alignment from the stakeholders that are buying it off, the product owners, make sure you're aligned on the work as well. Go through the stories to ensure alignment on the details, so making sure you have all the scope and acceptance criteria in those stories are really important. Then after you have the scope, now you got it to estimate it. How big is this, or how long it's going to take, how complex it is, right? Story points. That's as if you're using story point estimation. Of course, if you're using no estimates, you don't have to worry about that, but something I want to point out. Any actions added from the previous retrospective. So looking at making sure you capture that work. That's important work. If it's going to help you improve your velocity, improve your team synergy, absolutely capture it, right? Maybe it's a critical feedback from the stakeholders when you're on the demo that in order for them to use the product, they need to have that. So let's capture that in the backlog. This is the last chance to capture it, just in case we forgot. Capacity planning, remember your methods might be different depending on how you're estimating. Like as far as yesterday's weather, average the last 3 sprints, out of office, video on estimation methods. Again, I covered that in another video of different estimation methods. So I'm not gonna go about the details here, just saying, how do you actually plan or predict what your team's going to do for the next sprint? Make sure you're actually having that conversation. Capture the sprint goals. Remember, aggregating all the user stories. Commitments from the team. Remember, out of 5 being confident, 1 being not confident at all. Brings up those discussions and it brings in the capture risk, issues, assumptions, dependencies. If we're not confident, there might be some things we need to capture here. So important. Also, understanding dependencies within the sprint. Not recommended. It happens though, but something you can kind of maybe mitigate in advance. And then start the sprint as soon as possible. Remember, it's important though, you start the sprint when you have at least the story points and the user stories in there, the sprint before you start it, and making sure that time when you select it is started after that as well. Otherwise, you'll have to do some manual work. It's not the end of the world, but it will help you long-term and at scale to make sure you're having the next conversation at sprint planning. I want to thank everybody for joining this video. If you like this video or you want this checklist for your team, please subscribe in this video below my YouTube channel. Please like the video, and it can get you access to these checklists along with the other checklists from the videos that you can use to make your team successful and high performing.